Hello, my name is Jerry, and thank you for taking the time to watch this video I've titled A Yanks Guide to Snooker, Part 1. The purpose of creating this video is to introduce snooker to all those who know little or perhaps nothing of this great English billiard game known as snooker. I'll also compare this game to all those that play or are familiar with American pool, just like yours truly. Okay, let's get right to it. This video is 27 minutes long and includes 3 sections. Section 1 is the origins of snooker. Section 2 is the rules of snooker. And finally, Section 3 are the snooker skills required to play this game well. Yeah, I know, 27 minutes is a long time, but no one says you have to watch it all in one session. So what else do you have to do during the COVID-19 lockdown? In any event, without further ado, here's a Yanks Guide to Snooker Part 1. For the record, I've always loved the game of billiards, or pool, regardless whatever name it goes by. Games like 8-ball, 9-ball, or straight pool, which is my favorite pool game of all. Although I can't explain why I like straight pool the best, it might be because of the 1961 movie The Hustler. Like, who can forget the characters of Fast Eddie Felson and Minnesota Fats?
You like to gamble, Eddie? Gamble money on pool games? That's what you and I shoot again a straight. $100? Let's make it $200. Now I know why they call you Fast Eddie.
Then one day I was watching a Jeanette Lee 9-ball match. During that game, the sportscaster mentioned this lady would make one hell of a snooker player. Snooker? Well, to be honest, I kinda heard of snooker, but I absolutely knew nothing about it, like zippity-doo-dah about it, just like the rest of America. It was at that moment I decided to learn more about the game, and oh my God, talk about an eye-opener. The first thing I noticed is that snooker is popular in over 80 countries. I also discovered that England and China have the greatest number of ranked players in the top 125. Overall, 20 different countries were represented in the top 125 players list. To my surprise, not one was from North America. Not one. How was that possible, I asked myself. So for the hell of it, I decided to seek the origins of snooker. It seems that sometime after the Big Bang and the cooling of the Earth's crust, French nobles started throwing stones at chickens as a form of entertainment. This led to their inventing the game known as croquet with its many colored balls. Somehow this form of ground pool led to many other indoor billiard games, 2 of which were known as pyramids and black pool. Both of these games caught the attention of Sir Neville Francis Fitzgerald Chamberlain, a military officer stationed in India. While trying to figure out what to do in the rainy season, he combined these 2 billiard games into what eventually was called snooker, which was a derogatory nickname given to first-year cadets studying at the Royal Military Academy. Then the BBC liked the bright colors to show off their new color technology and decided to broadcast a show they called Pot Black. Well, the rest is history. Okay, it's now time to check out the rules of snooker. Before explaining the rules of snooker, let's look at the dimensions of the snooker table itself. The traditional English snooker table is 12 feet in length by 6 feet wide and is therefore 3 feet longer than the standard size pool table. Snooker balls and snooker pockets are also smaller than those found on pool tables. This illustration visually compares each table, balls, pockets, and their actual metrics between the 2 games. This next illustration shows how a snooker table is set up before a player's initial break-off. Note there are 15 red balls and 6 other balls of different colors. In fact, those 6 other balls collectively are simply called colors and are always set at the location shown here at the beginning of the frame. The white ball is also called the cue ball. Also worth noting is that the area to the right of the white line is known as the bulk area. Now time to explain the rules of snooker. On an American pool table, there's lots of games to play, such as 9-ball, 8-ball, and straight pool, to name a few. But on the English snooker table, there's only one game to play. Snooker is typically played between two players. In snooker, a match is made up of a specific number of frames. These frame values can range from a low of perhaps 4, maybe even 7, all the way to 35, and it represents the maximum number of frames that can be played in this specific match. In a 7-frame match, the first player to reach 4 wins. In an 11-frame match, the first to reach 6 wins, and so on. To win a frame, you must score more points than your opponent. To do this, a player uses a cue along with a white ball to hit the correct object ball in any of the pockets on the table. When the player hits the correct ball in any pocket, it's called potting the ball, or more typically, potting the color. It should be noted, however, in snooker you do not have to call your pocket for the correct object ball you're attempting to pot. And in some cases the player has to call the ball he's attempting to hit and perhaps pot. However, regardless whether you pot the ball or not, the correct object ball must be hit first, otherwise the player will be penalized. And yes, the value of the potted balls vary depending on their color. This diagram shows their respective values. There are 15 balls worth 1 point each. Yellow is 2 points, green 3, brown 4, blue 5, pink 6, and finally the black ball is worth a maximum of 7 points. In snooker, after the beginning of the frame with its initial break-off, the player must first hit a red ball on the table. If the player manages to pot any red ball, he gets 1 point. He must then hit any color ball on the table and ideally pots that ball where its point value is added to the player's current score. The colored ball that was just potted is then placed back on the table in its assigned starting position, if possible. The process of trying to pot another red ball, followed by any color ball, starts all over again, until the player fails to pot the proper ball. At such time, it's the end of this player's turn, and the other player tries to hit and pot the appropriate object ball. Once all the red balls have been potted, the remaining colors must be hit and potted in their ascending order. And once potted, they are not respotted on the table. A player wins a frame by scoring more points than his opponent. The player wins a match when they have achieved the best of score from a predetermined number of frames. Now let's discuss things you cannot do in snooker. You must hit the correct object ball, otherwise you will be called for a foul and a miss. This results in 4 points being awarded to your opponent. In such cases, your opponent also has the option of playing where the balls lie, or making you play how the table existed before the actual foul. It's also possible to be awarded 5, 6, or 7 points if you hit the blue, pink, or black ball in a foul and miss scenario. In some cases, a foul and a miss can result in what's known as a free ball. This occurs if the cue ball winds up in a position where his opponent is snookered from the proper object ball. In this animation, note the player missed all the red balls and the cue ball came to rest behind the brown ball. Since no two sides of any red ball can be seen from the cue ball's current position, the opponent has the option of declaring any ball a red ball, then potting it, receiving 1 point, and then continuing with his next shot. Here's the free ball rule applied in actual play. Player Marco Fu finds himself snookered to the red object ball. He subsequently misses the red ball and leaves his opponent snookered as well. Since two edges of the red ball cannot be seen, the referee declares a free ball. His opponent accepts the free ball, declares the blue ball a red ball, and then goes on to pot it and receive 1 point. Note the blue ball is respotted and the player continues with the next shot. You are also not allowed to hit any ball off the table. You also cannot move what is known as touching balls. In short, if the cue ball is touching another ball, you cannot move the other ball on your shot.
Perfect.
Otherwise, it'll be a foul. Or hit the cue ball twice with 1 stroke. Snooker scoring also has some interesting twists to it as well. First, if the amount of potable points left on the table is not enough for the opponent to win the frame, the opponent can concede by not returning to the table or something equivalent. As an alternative, the opponent can elect to continue to play in the hopes of snookering his opponent as many times as needed to eventually have a winning total. Let's see how this works. In this frame, Marco Fu has 76 points to Ryan Day's 28. If Ryan were to pot all the remaining balls on the table, how many points would that be? Well, let's see. If he potted the last red and then took the highest value color possible, which is black, that would be 8 points. If he then potted the yellow through the black ball, that would mean an additional 27 points. His current score of 28 plus 8 plus 27 equals 63, which is 13 points shy of Marco's 76. For Ryan to win, that would mean he'd need, at the very least, 4 4-point snookers. Ryan was actually able to win with a combination of snookers and free balls. Finally, if the frame score ends in a tie, a respotted black is placed back on the table with the first player to pot it winning the frame. Here's a frame that illustrates many of the interesting scoring rules of snooker I've just presented. It highlights creating snookers, escaping from snookers, the free ball rule, and even a respotted black to break tie scores. Yan misses, but before watching Trump's next shot, let's look at his current circumstances. His current score is 35. If he were to pot the last red plus the black ball, that would be another 8 points. If he then were to pot the yellow through the black ball, that would be an additional 27 points. That would make his best possible score 70, which is still 4 points less than Yan's 74. Therefore, Trump needs 1 4-point snooker to tie. And if he were to tie, the winner would then be determined by the first player potting a respotted black. So the first order of business for Trump is to try and create a difficult snooker to escape from. Yan now needs to escape this snooker without leaving Trump snookered as well, which would in turn leave a free ball and more points on the table to pot. And with more potable points on the table, that means Trump could win outright. Unfortunately for Yan, he left a free ball that allowed Judd to win the frame without even the respotted block. Trump accepts the free ball, declares the green ball a red ball, pots it, receives 1 point, and then goes on to pot all the remaining balls to win the frame outright. But those are basically the rules in a nutshell. However, there are a few more details to know to complete your general knowledge of snooker to actually play a frame. For example, the term known as cannon is where a player hits the cue ball to make contact with more than one ball. Then there's what's known as the plant in snooker, which is also known as a combo or combination shot in pool. It simply means hitting the object ball that pops another ball that is legal. A bank shot in pool is known as a double in snooker. In both games, it means hitting the object ball into any cushion first before potting it. And finally, just like in pool, there are hundreds of terms used in snooker that can only be learned by either playing the game, watching many snooker games, or reading the official snooker publications. Okay, those are the general rules of snooker. However, no doubt you'll need to watch many games before appreciating the subtleties of the snooker rules, its scoring system, strategies, and in summary, why this game requires a much larger skill set than any form of American billiards. And who better than the world's top snooker professionals to demonstrate the skills required to play this game well. Selby will attempt to pot the blue ball, then hit 3 rails, while also avoiding the ball colors to finally break up the pink and red balls. Although I've not even played one game of snooker, I can nonetheless tell just how difficult and challenging this game is, but clearly how much fun it would be to play, along with being a great sport to watch. And after watching many games of professional snooker by the best players in the world, I now seldom watch professional pool games any longer. Why? There are at least 4 new skills required in snooker versus any game of pool. They are known as the safeties, creating snookers, escaping snookers, and finally scoring dynamics. Personally, I think these new required skills make it far more interesting and entertaining than any pool game I've ever played. Let's look at the skills that are in common between these two games. The first is cue ball control. Certainly the ability to position one's cue ball after hitting the correct object ball is certainly critical to both games. Here's Judd Trump potting a difficult black while moving the last red ball off the rail, knowing it'll be his next shot. And if you can't master cue ball control, there's no chance of becoming a good player in any billiard-like game. However, in snooker, cue ball control is even more challenging than pool because of not only the sheer increased size of the snooker table, but there are also many obstacles on the snooker table that come in the form of colored balls. The next in-common skill required is the ability to master long shots. This would be called long potting in snooker. Hey, anyone can make the short distance shots, so that'll be easy in any billiard game. The next in-common skill would be the break-off. However, in snooker, the break is not an advantage as it is in the typical game of pool. In the snooker break, players are actually trying to execute a safety. not to really break up the red balls. In effect, the snooker break is similar to straight pool, where you try to leave your opponent with the most difficult shot possible after your break. However, in straight pool, you are required to hit 2 balls to the rail, but in the snooker break, you simply have to hit at least 1 red ball. After hitting any red ball, ideally you leave the cue ball on the cushion in the balk area for your opponent. To break up the red balls, or other object balls when needed, the player will have to execute what is termed as a cannon. As you may recall, the term cannon means hitting the correct object ball with the intent of having the cue ball hit a cluster of red balls, or possibly other bunched up color balls. The next new skill required in snooker that infrequently presents itself in pool is the safety shot. Although one can argue there are safety shots in pool, they are infrequent and certainly nowhere near the frequency of snooker. And at the professional level of snooker, safety execution and its strategy are important elements of the game. And typically, the best safety shot in snooker is the snooker itself. As you may recall, a snooker is the ability to place the cue ball behind other balls that eliminates any direct path to the correct object ball. The yellow ball is the object ball. There is no direct shot to the object ball. The opponent is snookered. Let's now take a look at snooker escapes, another great element of this game. In this first example, Neil Robertson finds himself snookered behind the green ball with the object ball of any red ball. To hit any red ball, he'll have to hit 3 rails. Note he left no easy shot on any red ball for his opponent. In this next example, Mark Selby finds himself snookered behind the green ball, preventing him from directly hitting the yellow object ball. Using a 2-rail shot, not only does he hit the yellow object ball, but also snookers his opponent behind the black ball. This is certainly another great snooker escape. I've saved the best for last. Here's Ronnie O'Sullivan snookered behind the yellow ball, with the object ball being the last red on the table. In what appears to be an almost impossible shot, Ronnie not only hits the red object ball using 4 cushions, but he also leaves his opponent snookered as well. How's that for a spectacular escape and entertainment? Let's now discuss the snooker scoring system, which is one of the elements I think that makes this game far more interesting than pool. Since color balls have different point values, it's a dynamic that makes snooker also a thinking man's game. So it's not just all about potting balls. And if by chance you're wondering what snooker's equivalent of a perfect game in bowling is, or a hole-in-one in golf, it's a snooker break of 147. This is achieved by a perfect 36 shots where the player pots 15 red balls along with a black ball for each of those reds, and then pots the yellow through the black. And by the way, the snooker pro illustrating how to score the perfect 147 is Ronnie O'Sullivan, who started playing at the young age of 9. Now in his early 40s, he's still touted to be the most naturally gifted snooker player ever, and has many accomplishments that support that claim for sure. He can also play left or right-handed equally as well, which is certainly a big advantage in snooker due to the size of the table. Because of his fast play, he's also been nicknamed the Rocket, and is still a big draw in any tournament he chooses to enter. I have to admit that Ronnie's style and skills, combined with his fast play, along with the setting of the bright contrasting colors of multicolored balls on a solid green felt, hooked yours truly on a game invented in 1875 by Sir Neville Francis Fitzgerald Chamberlain. I wonder if Mr. Chamberlain had any idea of the revolution he would cause. Well, there you have it. A quick introduction to snooker and perhaps an understanding why this game is popular in so many countries. For the record, I have little hope that snooker will ever be popular in America as it is in so many countries, so I'll probably never see a real snooker table, except in a video, or attend an actual snooker match, or for that matter, ever play one single game of snooker. But that's okay. I know that with today's internet and video technologies, I can watch snooker tournaments from around the world at any time. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned for part 2 of A Yanks Guide to Snooker.